Okay, so we were also looking at bridging the researcher-developer chasm. So Steve chaired, I scribed, and it was Steve Lee, Steve, myself, Miro and David who had discussed this issue. And we summarised the purpose of the breakout as basically trying to ensure win-win for both parties, or to actually try and get both parties to view themselves as one party might be a better idea. So our conclusions were for researchers primarily to teach them the distinction, or to communicate the distinction between being a coder and a software developer. So this is a common misconception that software development is about writing code, being programming, and it's really to get the distinction that just because you can write code, that does not mean you're a software developer. It's one very small part of the entire task of software development, which could range from anything from talking to people, human beings, not computers, to actually elicit their requirements, design, testing, documentation, the dreaded D word, deployment, ongoing support and follow-up training possibly. All these things which do not involve typing in, print line, hello, and things of that ilk. Things that actually involve interacting with other human beings, particularly the users who are actually going to use the software possibly long after you have gone. Which brings me on to our developers. So developers, well, there are a number of conclusions. Developers should be educated in the ways of not blinding researchers with jargon about, we'll just zap that with JUnit, and if we get a 0 pass error rate, then all is fine. This will run on 100 CPU cycles, but not 110 on Red Hat Linux 1.4. To recognise the paramount importance of users is actually something I'm not sure if you're aware of called the Hicks and Harts and Star life cycle, which is not so much a software engineering model, but as a state of mind, which basically has all the tasks involved in software development, from requirements through to design, programming, testing, and at the centre is a little diagram with the user in it, which is basically to convey the message that at all points in a software development lifecycle, you should be talking to the users, not just, hi, what do you want, and there it is, bye. So an example that I've done this before, but I like this example. I can think of an academic research project that had to develop software for a group of researchers whose prime platform was Windows, so they developed the software that ran on an actual Linux emulator. When asked why, the users, the target users, are told, well, we don't actually use Microsoft products. Despite the fact that for the target community, the users, that would be the simplest, best, most easily installable tool to do the job. And finally, to teach developers or educate them, this relates to some of the points Rob made, the value of domain immersion. It does require a developer to fully code, or to actually define more effective solutions, and indeed to actually move towards the users to actually undertake some form of familiarization with the actual domain of the researchers. So I'm working on a project that involves medical imaging, so I now know a little bit more about medical imaging than I did 3 months ago. Not enough that I could give a lecture on it, but enough that I could give the essence. But I also have contacts in the research community who I can then go and ask for further information. We need to improve the ability for researchers to actually find research software. A lot of research may involve actually re-implementing the same software over and over again, just perhaps because there's a lack of trust as to what's out there, but perhaps just because people can't find what's already been done in that domain. And one that Steve mentioned that helps towards this is DOPE, D-O-A-P, not D-O-P-E, description of a project, which is a simple metadata markup to encourage information about projects, software, and the like to be shared. And finally, the goal is basically to improve information flow in both directions, from researchers to developers and back again, possibly via specific modules at universities. At EPCC, we have a programming skills module on our MSc, which is designed to take researchers and turn them from coders into programmers, and then a soft dev module, which is to give them the full life cycle and show, well, you can program, but this is the whole context of software development in which programming sits. And also, for example, in project training. So if a researcher does get a hardcore software developer on their team, to actually encourage some form of training for that developer so they actually understand the domain in which they are writing, and so understand more of the problems that they are trying to solve by implementing that software. So for further work, we came up with, well, 3 main ideas. The first one being identify existing online educational resources or projects for developers. So if you're going into medical imaging or, I don't know, chemical analysis, are there any existing resources that might actually help a developer get up to speed in understanding these? Or indeed for researchers, are there any existing online education resources that might help them become a bit better in terms of software development? To promote again, following on from Rob's conclusions, to promote the necessity of software development to funding councils, which is improving already, but maybe, for example, if a project proposal has said, oh, we're going to write some software, to actually ensure that they actually give a plan as to how they're actually going to go about that in a high level, who they might be consulting for advice on the software development aspects, such as the SSI, and if they are going to be redeveloping software, to justify why they're redeveloping the software and not using existing packages, or at least to demonstrate they've had a look at existing packages out there already and why these might or might not be appropriate. And finally, to form a directory of existing research projects and software out there that could be potentially reused to the benefit of others in the similar or indeed different domains.